Welcome everyone. Welcome to Conversations about Transformation, the Keys to Lasting Change. This is a series that we've put together between master trainers here at NLP Marin and some of our graduates, and how they have incorporated transformational NLP into their lives and work, and their unique perspectives on transformation and change that is lasting. I think this is especially timely at the time of year when we are recording and airing these conversations, when everyone's attention is on what we want to change, and really hoping that this time it will be lasting, or how to have it be lasting. So NLP is a training center with a unique world-class curriculum on transformation and change. So I want to welcome you to today's conversation, which we have titled Changing the Systems of Power, Privilege, and Authority, the First Steps. So this is a conversation with Meghna Majmudar, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and Coach, and Carla Camou, Master Trainer here at NLP Marin. I should already ask Meg, did I pronounce your last name right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm LiYana Silver. I'm also a graduate of NLP Marin, facilitating today's conversation. I'm going to stay a little quiet, have these two converse. Real quickly though, for me, I am also a graduate and I got my certification in transformational NLP as a practitioner, I think around 2010. And I have applied that to my work in my private practice with my coaching clients as a transformational coach for women, certainly in every aspect of my life, and also in my writing in one of my first books, Feminine Genius. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Carla, who is one of our master trainers here at NLP Marin, also a personal mentor to both Meghna and I. She's been involved with NLP for over 30 years. She has worked with hundreds and hundreds of students and clients across the globe who are wanting personal change or to facilitate change in the lives of others. Here at NLP Marin, Carla trains students and training assistants and is known for creating a special space for accelerated and joyful learning. Carla also works alongside Carl Buchheit in continually refining and evolving the body of work known as transformational NLP. She has the profound ability to make skills that seem magical to most accessible to the many. Anything you want to add about yourself, Carla?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay. Meghna, do you want to just go, we can leave your official bio and just share a little bit about you?
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Meghna Majmudar. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and coach. Right now, I'm the head of executive and leadership services at a consulting firm called Ready Set, but I also have a personal practice focused on coaching and support work for firsts and onlys. So the first from their family or community, or only one like themselves in the room. And it's a body of work that I really built off of what I learned in the classroom and being a TA with NLP Marin. And so really happy to share about it and get into kind of the changes that have happened with this training.
I'm really excited to hear what. Yeah. And
it's been a while since I've gotten to hear what you do, so
Well, this is a treat for all of us, right? Because Meghna, is it been about 8 to 10 years since you probably were in the training rooms? Is it less?
Less. I was first introduced to NLP and NLP Marin style NLP in 2009, 2010 by another former graduate. And, back then I lived in New York, and then in 2016, ran into friends from New York who went through NLP Marin, and I was like, oh, that's right. That's right here. And I think in the wake of the 2016 election, I was really feeling like, what is the way to really clarify and be more impactful in the world? So I enrolled in my first foundations course in March 2017, and I went straight through everything, finishing up with my year of TAing in March 2020. So.
Wow. Okay. Still, it's really nice to be back with you. And what a good time to be to be preparing. Will you just give us a sense about how you, like, what is your life like? What's your work like? Specifically, how you've incorporated transformational NLP?
Yeah, so when I was going through the training, I was, self-employed and really trying to find my foothold in the world. So really I had this background being a strategy consultant and, helping businesses and leaders, but there was just this like personal experience that I wasn't able to get out from underneath. And I think, so I was just like, just making enough to pay for classes, keep a roof over my head, throughout all of that. But, so much change going on underneath the surface. And so kind of when COVID happened, my business dried up and I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I took a moment to write about the things I talk to people about. So things like complex equivalence and how we feel power and kinesthetics and all of that, like all the NLP stuff. And, wrote that. And then because of my focus on first and onlys, because of my interest being a person of color, a woman in the workplace, and having that, part of my coaching philosophy is that power and leadership is often a very kinesthetic experience, you can feel someone's power kinesthetically. And that's not something we often talk about. And so really noticing the internal landscape, which is what NLP helps one to understand. What are my internal structures? What is my internal map? I have one client who, as he was making the move from a senior manager into an executive, all I said to him, like, we've gone off the edge of your map. And he was like, absolutely, I don't know how to breathe. And that's what NLP really allowed me to do, because right now I think we're all off of our maps. We don't know how to breathe. And so being able to say, okay, what are the tools? What's the internal places I can go to that can shift? And so what happened was, my business kind of like went to zero, and just kind of like taking it, just kind of staying present. And then, unfortunately, after the murder of George Floyd, there was a lot of attention being placed on questions around diversity in the workplace, inclusion, equity. And so kind of being at the right time, right place, had partnerships with certain firms, and I was off to the races. And in a matter of a few months, it became a full-time job. And then now I am a leader in an organization and kind of in this world day to day. And now, on the edges of like, I'm going off my map. How do I kind of do the terraforming, which needs to happen off of our maps?
Meghna, what were the businesses asking for, and what did you do? Like, how did you come in? And because that was such a tender topic and such a like, so can you just
so what
LiYana, what
yeah,
like how do you start with people?
There were two entry points. So one was through, say, like I have this partnership on the coaching side. There was this organization that I work with, and they said, can you build a sponsorship program, not just for kind of up and coming leaders of color, but also the white male sponsors who will be sponsoring them. Can you coach both? Can you create a curriculum for both?
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, yes. And it's a fantastic curriculum. And then on the other side, and this is where Ready Set came in, they basically came in early on with, can you help us facilitate trainings on ally skills? So helping people see bias, help people understand privilege and how to apply it as an ally in the work environment. And then with my background in training, but also my work in strategy consulting, I very quickly went into a place where I was counseling heads of businesses, coaching them, helping them understand the different dynamics, the different things going on. And so it became more like strategic advisory, writing reports, coming up with strategic plans, but so much of it is learning and listening to the story being told in an organization, bringing up the story of what's not being said. So like holding enough space for people to share what's not being shared, so that there can be a new conversation between, say, leadership in an organization and kind of the lived experience in the organization day to day. So that's where the work has evolved to. But the start was, just this kind of like, how do we even start this conversation? Like, how do we even start to think about bias? And so one of the things that was really interesting, and I think in the NLP work, this is strategies, right? Like the strategies work of like, what's the trigger? What kind of takes you into certain reactions about something? And so what makes someone feel like they belong or feel included, are treated fairly? Like looking for the triggers, looking for what keeps people small versus not. A lot of belief elicitation and things like that underneath there.
Wow. I was always wondering how that was happening in organizations, because I haven't talked to really anybody about who's actually gone in and done this, because just the concept tends to trigger people into all sorts of emotions.
Yeah.
So it's a lot that you were managing there. A lot of different maps to make sense of and to do some translating between.
Yeah. And luckily I don't get caught up with guilt and innocence and shame and blame.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. So that's juicy. And then for those listeners, watchers who don't know what that means, Carla, can you give this is really important, I think, these concepts and the way that NLP Marin airs them and speaks about them and really gives us tools to work with them. So can you just give us the condensed version of those?
Yeah. And I am laughing here because this is like so key to the NLP Marin like coursework and body of knowledge. And, like there's always a moment where I ask my clients, have I given you my guilt and innocence talk?
Yeah. So guilt and innocence just kind of, it's so hard to condense it into something really short, but guilt and innocence tend to run us in life, and these are not functions that work very well for us to be guided by guilt and innocence. And this isn't about morally correct. This isn't about legally correct. This is about that internal sense of guilt and innocence. This exists all the time in us. It's running all the time. We have the experience of feeling guilty or innocence in lots of different situations. But when that's our guidance factor for how we do life, it can make us really crazy, because you're always kind of guilty and always kind of innocent, or always extremely guilty and extremely innocent simultaneously. So the guidance factor of being more aligned with yourself and what your values are and what is right for you tends to be a much better guidance. It's tricky to get to the place where you can do that. And we often have a lot of students that are like, well, you know, I'm really concerned that if I do that, then I'll start like walking all over people and hurting people. It's like, yeah, but your inner value system also has respect for others. So it has respect for yourself and respect for others. And when the respect is the place where you come from, then there are times where you are able to do things that you would normally have held yourself back because you would have felt guilty to do, but that doing so opens up whole new realms for other people and for yourself. And you might have some guilt as you do it, but since guilt isn't guiding you, you're just like, yeah, I'm going to be guilty of doing this. And so I imagine that, Meghna, some of what you're doing is like not feeling guilty when you say something that makes somebody uncomfortable, when it's done in service of allowing them to open up to a new place and actually experience people much more thoroughly than they have been.
Absolutely. And the way this becomes really like salient in the DEI conversation is that, you know, like, and I said this early on, say in what?
You just used a term that people might miss in the DEI conversation. I just want to get you to.
Yeah. So how this becomes real in the DEI conversation is that
what DEI is. That's what I want.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. Sorry. So diversity, equity, inclusion. At its crux, there is that white male, older white male who has crashed out in guilt. You know, and then this younger person of color who's kind of like fully like innocently angry. You know, that's like the most kind of polarizing way I can kind of frame it. And I'm just doing that as an example of like, and I would say this early on to my white clients, it doesn't serve us for you to crash out in guilt. You know, and it is that respect of like, so let what is going on, because around guilt and innocence, we feel guilty. Guilt and innocence are what we used as children to belong in our families of origin. So I was raised in a vegetarian household. To this day, eating meat feels weird to me because like, it's not something we did. And so, but now I can just say like, look, there's a way I want to like be in the world and energized in the world, and I can feel the guilt, but I can keep moving forward. And so being able to look at guilt or innocence of like, ooh, this idea of a guilty pleasure. Whenever someone says that around me, I'm like, pleasure is not guilty. Pleasure is pleasurable. Like, why do you need to put guilt into the pleasure? Like, can you just have the pleasure? You know, and things like that. So it's like watching people's words, kind of finding them. And I think this is so important to like, how can we have these difficult conversations, these taboo conversations, is to just come in without that expectation of judgment. And it's really kind of like one of the things the NLP training taught me is to really key into like true natures, my own and that of the client. And sort of everyone's always choosing the best option on their menu. And so, okay, if this is the way this person is, like, what's the world they live in that this is the best option on their menu? And so, you know, and I talk about—
I'm going to slow down because that's really new for a lot of people to that concept. I just want to underline it's so beautifully said there. What is the world they live in if this is the best option on their menu? If you actually really, really try to kind of, when somebody does something that you can't understand, when you ask yourself that question and try to feel what that is, that takes you to a completely different place of understanding. So it just beautifully said. I'll let you go again, but I just want to underline that is kind of a core of some of what we teach. And you just kind of summarized it in a way that, yeah, that changes everything and takes the need for the person inquiring to feel guilty or innocent about the person that they're inquiring about, but it replaces it with a curiosity.
And let me just back up even one more step, because I think this is really key. That what if, well, NLP Marin and transformational NLP operates on the premise that what if we all have a menu, and there are certain options on there and there are certain options that are not on there, and we're always going to choose the best one, the juiciest one, but my best one might seem really bad to you. And then through the process of training and learning, we actually add options to our menu. And so that our menu gets so much more range and diverse. And so that, just to back up and offer a little bit more of that frame.
Yeah.
Love it.
I mean, that's how the change happens, is we're not actually changing people. We're just putting more options on their menu. And then people have full freedom to choose different options on their menu. And that's where the change comes in.
I feel like I kind of want to end right there. That's beautiful, but we won't. So I'm just really appreciating, like you said, Carla, this is such a tender conversation, and it's so timely. It's always been timely, but it's just more in the cultural eye at the moment. And so we are talking about power as well, right? And I'm wondering if we can back up a little bit and hear from you both about how you see power. Like, what are the dynamics of power? And certainly we could talk about personal power. We could talk about power in organizations and between people. But Meghna, will you start us off?
Yeah. I mean, this has always been kind of my entryway into this work. And, for a long time, and I've held that a lot of leadership literature, like women's leadership, like if you're a member of a underrepresented group, like leadership literature doesn't look at the dynamics of power interpersonally or systemically. So what I mean by that is, so one of the first exercises I do with any coaching client is really understanding their internal experience of power, authority, and privilege. So in NLP land, it's called complex equivalence. People's external behaviors and how do we code them as anything internally. So like you see, say, a woman yelling at a child in a grocery store. Some people would code that as abusive. Other people would code that as appropriately disciplinarian. So that's what a complex equivalence is. So, someone, the way they act in a meeting, some people could code that as powerful. Other people might code it as overbearing. Other people might, so really understanding what are people's core beliefs around power, authority, and privilege. And what I found is that, especially for people from underrepresented groups, the firsts and the onlys, power and authority tend to have negative connotations. Power is scary. Like, I have seen people just stop breathing when I ask them to finish the sentence phrase, power is, authority is. Authority is controlling, authority is demanding, authority cannot be trusted. These are people's core beliefs around power and authority. And we're asking them to become powerful authority figures. And so how are they going to violate themselves and become this negative thing? And so I really need to have people kind of understand, oh my God, I have a negative bias towards power. I have a negative bias towards authority. And then once they realize that, they get to make the choice. Do I want to change that? How do I want to change that?
And how does that change my relationship with everything in my world if I change that?
Carla, would you have anything more to add about power, personal, intrapersonal, or interpersonal power from an NLP Marin perspective?
I don't think I could add a lot from what Meghna just said, because that's such an let me just get my thoughts here. So we're in NLP, we look at the structure of experience. So what Meghna has done is taken the structure of power and or the experience of power and started to understand each person's individual structure of it, as opposed to having it as this nominalization where we assume everybody knows what you mean when you say power. And so we wouldn't, in our classes, necessarily talk about power or ask somebody about power unless they brought it up as we were working with them. But the idea of it is a different experience for everybody, and that it's important when you're working with somebody, when you're interacting with somebody, to know what their experience of it is and to know what your experience of it is, to know what those differences are. So I'm like, just even thinking in terms of all the organizations that have tried to elevate people to create more diversity in their organizations. And without understanding that, a lot of people have been dropped into jobs that where they really are struggling and nobody understands why they're struggling. But it's because of it's like there's so much just internal structure there that needs a little bit of tweaking. That with, like, if somebody is mentoring somebody in a new job, understanding like their entire life they have held power in one way, and now we're asking them to take control and to experience themselves as powerful in this organization, and it means something different to the mentor and the mentee, and the mentor is just pushing, here, let's go, right? Because the mentor means something different, and it's this exciting, it's like, now you've got power. This, and just the many facets, like that this happens on for somebody who is trying to step into leadership positions.
Right. And this was all negotiated. We made all our decisions about power, most people did, by the time we were 7. Original authority figures were mom and dad, or the equivalents. And so, you know, for me growing up, you know, power was an angry mother. It was a young mother with 2 children who had just immigrated to the United States, low job security, just trying to survive. And so my first managerial jobs, like, power to me was anger. It was like I had to come across a certain way because that's how power coded for me. And woo, the feedback I got about that, woo, especially on a woman, especially a woman of color, ooh, does not land well. That's a not great CEQ, as we would say. So, and so it is that understanding the structure of experience. That's the interpersonal. The systemic views of power I've built on from this book called Finite and Infinite Games by a man named James Carse, came out in the 80s. And he kind of sets up a really interesting kind of a distinction between a finite game and an infinite game, and, you know, how power is negotiated in a finite game, you know. And so with a lot of my clients, when we get to like really seeding new sources of power for them, it's for also having them kind of experience, am I in a finite game or an infinite game? Am I playing to win, or am I playing for the joy of playing, which is one of the distinctions I like about a finite versus infinite game.
Meghna, you mentioned a while ago when we were talking previously about cheap forms of power. And it sounds like maybe the anger that you had coded as power was one. Will you share more about that?
Yeah. So anger, if you think about it, is an aroused state. You know, it kind of gets your heart rate pumping, like it gives you this power, and you can get into a powerful state. Can't stay there really long. It takes a lot of energy to stay angry.
Yeah.
It burns a lot of fuel, like emotionally in the brain, like lots of chemicals, I think. And so I think it's a cheap form of power. It lasts about 5 seconds. It's a sugar rush of power. The other cheap form of power, I think, is moving into saviorism, like being completely innocent. I'm so innocent. I am just here for you. And both of these, they take a lot more than like the like hit of feeling good. And so
they require some attention on the possibility or the existence of a threat. Because anger is what we feel when something we value is threatened. So we have to, and the same with the savior. So it also means that you have to live in a space where there is a threat and be defending some way against the threat.
Yeah.
And so exhausting.
And so it's expensive to operate in that way. And I think the question is like, what if power, like this really kind of, in finite and infinite games, the corollary in the infinite game is strength, which is like, strength of just kind of stability, ability to be resilient, that sort of thing, what we're trying to build towards. I think it's like, how do we get there? And what if that is our true nature, what we come from? So someone may see me as powerful or not, but I'm operating from a place of strength.
Yeah.
Carla, let me maybe have you start this one out. Meghna, you said that one cheap form of power, and I certainly just want to say I'm a big fan of anger, especially well-placed anger, especially in women and those in marginalized identities. But you mentioned another form of cheap power as savior, being the savior, and the kind of coming in as a hero. So there is this may not be unique to NLP Marin, but I think it's really a powerful learning through NLP Marin is the idea of the hero savior, and the victim and the perpetrator, and that triangle of being chained together that happens. So Carla, would you just talk about that so that everybody understands? And then Meghna, I know you have a lot to say about this.
Meghna's going to add a lot to this, because we work from just paying attention to the victim perpetrator, and we don't often add, is the third role the savior? Is that what in there? Okay. Yeah. But victim and perpetrator need each other to exist. So you can't actually be a victim if there isn't a perpetrator, and you can't actually be a perpetrator if if you don't have a victim. That they're locked in a dance together, and that they actually support the existence of each other. So noticing that when there is that dynamic, we notice that just that they both sort of feed something for the other one, and that gets kind of addictive after a while, and that there are ways to step out of it. And I think the savior role is like kind of a third place we sometimes try to go to get away from being perpetrator or victim, but all of it is kind of a false stance. And we're not talking victim perpetrator like legal kind of setting. We're talking, you said something and I am the victim of what you said, and right, that kind of space, or what we do inside. One of the things I like to offer people that starts to just scramble the way we think about it is the perpetrator is the victim's victim, and the victim is the perpetrator's perpetrator. And it's a like, and then I generally ask people, which would you rather be, the victim or the perpetrator? And most people have a quick answer, and then it's like, okay, stay with that for a second, but really think about it and follow it through. Like neither one is what we almost always come up with. And there's a more integrated place where that game, and that's like a finite game inside, that can transform into something where there is more of an alignment with self. And I think this is also where power comes in that true power is that being aligned with yourself, knowing yourself, and having the respect for all life, which includes yourself in the way that you move in the world. And that's a very different space. And that doesn't mean that you get walked on. It doesn't mean that you tolerate inappropriate behaviors. But it is a stance that is very, very difficult for other people to overpower. And it is a place that it doesn't command respect, but it really invites it. And it's a pretty strong invitation when people are interacting with you. When you're clear within yourself and you're speaking honestly, and you're doing it from a place of respect where you're not needing to victimize anyone or be victim of anyone, it offers a completely different way of interacting. And Meghna, this is kind of what you work towards. Yeah. So that real power comes in that space. By the time somebody gets to be a TA with us, they have learned how to give each other some feedback, and there's a whole process in which we're teaching feedback. And the more basic, clear, and honest the feedback is, the easier it is for students to learn, and the more welcoming it is. Most people think of feedback as criticism. And even the way that we structure the feedback starts to redefine that, in that when a student gives another student feedback, they're saying 3 things I saw that worked. So I saw you do this, and it worked. You did this, it worked. This, it worked. One thing I would like to see more of. And this is very, very hard for students to get, right? They want to say 3 things you did right and 1 thing you did wrong. No, 3 things that worked and 1 thing I'd like to see more of. There is nothing in the way that we give feedback that says this was problematic or this was wrong. It's how do we add more in that works better? This is what is working for you. This is what we like. If you would do this more because it's already working for you, do more of it. This is a really different way of speaking truth to somebody, and of encouraging. And there's a lot in the world about don't do this, don't do that. This was a problem. And I find that people really grow and learn much faster when what they're doing well is pointed out to them.
Yeah. It's very true in my work. And, I'm not like other diversity consultants out there. Like, I take a very different stance in many ways, where clients are kind of like scared But this is where, you know, I'm going to add the savior. And so when it becomes that triangle, this is based on the work of from the Karpman drama triangle. So he was a social analyst, Karpman. And so, you know, one of the dynamics is when you take any one of those roles, you create the other two. Yeah. So the way you can't be a victim without a perpetrator and vice versa, you can't be a hero without a victim and perpetrator. You can't be a victim without the other two coming into play. And, you know, oftentimes what I see when I'm working with say, an organization, they're kind of putting an empty chair out for me to sit in as the hero savior. Oh, you're our DEI consultant. Come tell us what to do. And I'm like, nope, not sitting in that chair.
Yeah, victim and perpetrator are kind of hoping and waiting for the hero.
Yeah. So it's about not sitting in the chair. But, you know, at that point, because I'm coming hopefully from a place of that inner alignment, Carla, that you're talking about, is how do I add strength to both their systems? Or strength to their system, so there's no need for this dynamic anymore.
Nice.
Beautiful. Okay, 2 last questions for this fabulous, tiniest panel ever. Meghna, is there anything you just want to say about this training, transformational NLP? I don't know. You know, it's not your only you know, source of your genius, but it's one of them, and just wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to shout out about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's not just the one training, right? It's not going from foundations to masters to Hollow 1 to Hollow 2. It was doing family constellations at the same time. It was doing guilt and innocence, blame and shame, you know, lots of family constellations. It was the conversations with the cohort of students I got to be with, and then the cohort of students I got to TA. You know, so it was all of that. So you know, when I tallied the cost, I was like, 3 years, about $25K. And it was a steal, right? Because what has become available is a very different experience of life.
Yeah, the experience of going through it with other students, like people who want to learn NLP from books. It's like you get 10% of it, and it's a really nice juicy 10%, but it's not. It is all the different things you experience as a student with other students, from just really wonderful, delightful friendships, and just people you've never imagined that you'd actually be in a conversation with, be like actually like really enjoying them, to the ones that frustrate the heck out of you, and having some of that shift. You know, it's always fun when a couple students decide at the very beginning that they've got a real problem with each other. I can notice and that this condition is most likely temporary. Some never do like each other because they're just as, we do have preferences in this world. But a lot of times these people become the most treasured people in our lives. And there is something that happens inside yourself when you go through that with someone, and you remember really like almost hating them. And now when you think of them, all you do is smile. And to feel that then makes you curious about every other human being on the planet. And that curiosity is such an incredible thing, that space to be able to be with people and not like what they're doing, and still be curious about what's going on inside, that's the option on their menu right now. It changes the world.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add is that, you know, you say this in the class, No one wants to believe it, but it's completely true. It takes a while for everything to integrate. And I want to say it was probably kind of maybe a few months, maybe even a year after I finished Hollow 2, deep into like the TA time or towards the end of the TA time, getting to a place where I could I could name and articulate my internal mysteries and then just let them go. I mean, I still have my BS. Like, I still have things I work on. Like, there's still stuff to talk to my therapist about. But the kind of angst I felt around like this unknowable hole in myself evaporated sometime after the training finished. Don't know when, don't know
Yeah.
how, but it did.
Well, yeah, I mean, evaporation is a process, you know, it's like, we don't notice usually the moment that it happens. Yeah, and I find that it it does take a while to integrate, and it continues to integrate. It continues to grow in people. And I think in some ways that may have been one of the things that attracted me in the beginning to NLP. The first one was that when you work with somebody and they, for a piece of what we call change work, they walk away and they don't have to remember to be different. It's set up for them. It's not I have to remember this affirmation and keep doing this, or I have to think and be different, you know, or I have to really practice and get this as a habit. It's in there so that when you add the choice on the menu, if it's the best feeling choice, it just gets picked, and it's out of consciousness that happens. And that was the first thing that attracted me. And the second thing was that it just keeps growing, that it builds on itself inside yourself, and it is driven by what you want, not by what anybody from the front of the room or any TA says you should be or have. The first question in NLP is, what would you like? And the respect for the client and the choice for the client is so important, right? And then it builds from there. And I just, like, for me, just watching so many people, I love it when students come back and we get to talk, because they will, I know when they leave, when they graduate, they're going to go off. This is going to integrate. They're going to bring in so much of the rest of their lives. They're through these filters, and I have no idea what they're going to do with it, but I do know it's going to be kind of amazing what they do with it. And many of them, when I talk to them, don't even recognize, it's so much a part of who they are that they don't recognize how they're using it. But I see them out there in the world just doing just incredible things. Even if they're not using it professionally, they're using it just in the way that they interact with people. And to me, so it's like dropping pebbles in a pond, you know, and the ripples go out and you don't know what it interacts with. And I just feel like every student is, you know, is that. And I don't know what's going on, but I know our students are out there changing the world in a way that includes a lot more respect, a lot more love, and a lot more space. When all that stuff happened in 2020, that, you know, started with George Floyd's death, the whole consciousness shift, we did kind of talk about what do we need to do in NLP Marin. And some of what we're realizing is we are teaching the stance that allows the conversations to move forward. That we didn't actually, because we don't address specific topics, there wasn't a way to bring it in as a topic, but to notice that we are teaching a stance that allows for folks to have some of the conversations that really need to be had in the world, and to be able to, because the main thing in here, not that it's being taught about this stance, is that you don't know what anybody's world is. Even if they look like you and they come from the exact same background as you, their internal experience could be radically different, and you don't know. And so you have to find out with each person. It's about not having assumptions and going into the curiosity and the saying, what is this for you? And then the depth to which you go to the, you know, what you pull out, what you get curious about is there's some, we all need to do a certain amount of self-educating to even know what questions to ask. But
Beautiful.
the stance is there. Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful.
And I love how you're taking this forward, Meghna. This is wonderful.
So as we round here to the end, I just want to say that below this video will be more about Meghna, more about Carla, how you can follow up with them on their work. But I want to just do one last little lightning round question to end us, which is, so this will be for both of you. What if you just left our audience with one thing that you wish that they would have, really just like walk away from and have about transformation or about change? What would that be?
I have two things. One is it can happen in a second. And the second is it doesn't have to go through your mind.
Wow. That just leaves me speechless. So thank you, Meghna. That's great.
Anything you want to add, or should we just plus one on Meghna's?
We like to do it with as much laughter as possible.
Beautiful.
Even when it's terrifying. So
it's horrific.
Yeah. For an instant, until it, like, getting there is it can be really painful, but the moment, once it happens, it's worth every uncomfortable moment.
Beautiful. Thank you both. Thank you, Meghna, for getting to articulate, yes, the ways that you've taken this aspect of this training
and for the work you're doing out in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. Happy to do it.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. We'll call this conversation about transformation complete. And thank you both.
Thank you, LiYana. Thank you, Meghna.
Thank you.
Thank you.